fascinating topic, attaining global standards for Indian refining industry. We like to talk about it. I thought I'd take 5 minutes and just run the audience through what it means to attain a global standard. What are key elements and what exactly the Indian refining industry will need to prepare itself for if it actually wishes to attain global standards. I've got 4 different things basically spelling out the roadmap for this. It's refiner data, it's testing assaying capability, responsible gold compliance and its audit, and most importantly, proactive monitoring. So let's look at these very quickly. Why do we look at refinery data? Because we need to establish financial viability, we need to see the basic ability to meet standards. More importantly, we look at KYC and governance norms. And finally, of course, we need to document what are the facilities that are actually available. And apart from a write-up on the equipment, it's also nice to have a video which runs the viewer through exactly what the entity has and how it works. This is what I call very preliminary information, just to make somebody comfortable with the party one intends to deal with. The next one, of course, a lot of us here have been talking about assaying capability. How do you assay? What method do you use? Something that's a little new to the Indian environment is the concept of self-testing samples. Test yourself. Make sure that your results come consistently within an established norm. And once you've passed the self-testing stage, then you go to reference sample testings, and that's a tough one, wherein you will receive reference samples and you will be required to send your results. The results will be evaluated by an independent panel, and I wish you the very best if you think you can get through that easily. We had all kinds of problems, I must tell you. Having passed that stage, you then go to the physical. You make sample bars, they go for verification of the physical contour. And from the sample bars, samples are taken and sent separately to 2 independent referees to make sure that the assay of metal content in the sample bars are in line with the norms prescribed. In addition, anyone who's looking at setting up kind of a system in India will need to get into the business of providing certified reference materials. Very important when you look at calibrating all the equipment that you use in the laboratory, otherwise your results will be way out. Finally, of course, if you think you've crossed all of this, then you come to responsible gold. We've just heard from Pankaj about a responsible gold audit. I will not bore you with reading all of this. Essentially what it says is, it's an independent third-party audit and it's required to ensure compliance with global concerns. And please, for a moment, don't imagine that concerns in India are not global, and the sooner you start worrying about global concerns, the better. Key to an accreditation is proactive monitoring. This is where global institutions spend a lot of time and money and effort in assuring that refiners, once accredited to a global standard, are regularly and sometimes taken by surprise, proactively monitored, all done by an independent surveyor, so that there is complete impartiality in the outcome. Some of this can be done on a voluntary basis, some of this has to be done from a statutory compliance, some of it is providing reference testing samples, defining the procedure for the independent assay. So that was a very quick snapshot as to what a refiner needs to go through when you look at attaining any form of accreditation. I know we are struggling with should there be an accreditation in India, and how does one go about doing it, setting standards. But I think any form of standard or any organization that is going down this route would do well to remember these 4 chapters, without which, Mrs. Vatla, I have to say, no standard is going to be complete unless you've covered all these 4. So, now to the topic at hand, how do you go about doing this? Easier said than done. Let's provoke the debate. I'll just take it one by one. Is there an existing organization, or do we need to create one? Let's see. So, one will council. Do you think there is an existing organization in India that can take on this role, or do you think industry bodies, be it exchanges, be it refiners, be it banks, be it regulators, be it BIS, need to get their act together and create such a body? What's your take on it?
Although, as I said, in terms of setting standards, BIS has done a good job. But when it comes to creating, focusing on refining, and when India talks about Make in India, competing in the world, we talk of global standards and we talk of things. I think the organization doesn't exist.
Michael, welcome to India. You've been observing India at close quarters for some time, and now you're going to be more intimately involved. I'd like to see what you think is the way forward.
I don't see that India has at the moment an organization who can take care to fulfill that task. But I think drawing some comparison to what we have in Switzerland, it would make sense if it would be a government institution which controls this, because that gives a lot more credibility to the whole setup, and it's also easier to deal with, because we see it in Switzerland. In Switzerland, refineries, all sworn assayers, have a special education in fulfilling this task, and they are responsible to the government as well as they're responsible to the employee. In other words, if there's anything wrong with that, they not only have a problem with Valcambi or with me as representing Valcambi, they're also going to have a problem with the Swiss government. And that means Valcambi has a problem with the Swiss government. And this, I think, forces people to discipline. And most of it is all about discipline, because we want to make sure that our clients get the best out of us and that we gain trust. And this has been the advantage. So I think, yes, you should have it, you should build it, but it should have an official character, like a government institution.
James, you've been interacting for many, many years with the BIS. You've been instrumental in the ASEAN hallmarking drive in this country. How do you think one should go about creating such a body? Should it be industry-driven? Should it have some form of statutory obligation, as Michael has pointed out? How do you think we should actually go about doing this?
We do have a standard for gold refineries, and I feel the Bureau of Indian Standards can give the recognition of the accreditation for these fireside laboratories. But when it comes to proactive monitoring, I am afraid that BIS may not be having the right infrastructure facilities for that. What I feel is that, considering the fragmented nature of the Indian bullion industry, is having refineries abroad, we need to have our own industry platform. Of course, we can take the assistance of the international agencies, but our problems are typical to India. Like refineries in abroad have huge production capacities catering to the global market, whereas in India we have smaller refineries catering to the local markets. So we need to have a little more of proactive monitoring. We need to have set up at least 4 or 5 referral laboratories for continuous tracking of the quality.
I guess what you're saying is it has to be industry driven with the benign support or involvement of government, but not necessarily government driven being imposed on industry, if I get you correct. Pradeep, your upcoming refiner, what's your take on this?
Yeah, good afternoon everybody. As we all see now, the refining capacity moving east and such good capacity being created in India now. and I compliment what you've just presented in terms of what we need to do to create, a world-class refining capacity or, a global standard refinery in India. I think the points that have been highlighted are, bang on points. Now, yes, if we have to attain global standards, then we definitely need something which has to kind of regulate or determine the standards that the refineries need to follow. The debate actually is whether it has to be an industry-led body or whether it has to be a regulatory body from a government of India or Bureau of Indian Standard. I think that's a debate that we will have to do, and we'll have to deliberate all the facts. My sense is it will have to be an industry-led body, complemented by probably international agencies like LBMA, because they have been regulating the international refiners, all the good delivery refiners today. So they have the expertise, the ability, the standards, all of that in place. So let's not get into probably reinventing the whole wheel, and probably have a combination, if possible, where we can have an industry-led body, some guidance from LBMA, some involvement from BIS. And if we can create a structure around that, I think that should be great.
When you look at this industry-led development agenda, and if you look at who are the players in dealing with a global gold standard, top of the heap, of course, is the commodity exchange, because gold needs to be deliverable. Whether it's delivered or not is a different aspect, but gold needs to be deliverable. You need to look at banks that are, in one form or the other, involved in the actual delivery process. You need to look, of course, at refiners. You need to look at bullion merchants who are responsible for delivering the refined gold to the end consumer. You need to look at views of jewelers, who are the people who actually use gold of a global standard in manufacturing their jewelry. And at some stage, I guess you also need to look at a regulator, the Reserve Bank of India or the BIS or someone.
Yeah, you need to maintain independence.
Overview. As someone who's been so intimately involved with the bullion industry for decades now, how do you suggest going about doing this?
I don't have a straight answer just now, but I would definitely like that this needs to a good deliberation and to find out various options. Best practice is being observed by other players, other countries, and to see what suits us most. Because if we don't have this, we cannot build our business without a strong foundation. And transparency, fairness, they all bring strength to the foundation, and then you can build a big business and a sustainable model on the basis of that. So this is a very important topic, very important thing. We need to deliberate a little more to find out what are the options available to us. Governmental body or a trade body, but we must have some, so that the positive aspect of it is available to all the trade and industry on this particular front.
It's a bit scary. Beginning of this year, when the finance minister announced a series of steps for managing gold, and we are now well into the year, and we've had pretty acrimonious debate on gold monetization schemes, sovereign gold bonds, so on and so forth. My concern is that we keep on debating and we keep on creating forums for debate, but at the end of the day, we need to come to a finality. You cannot debate infinitum. You've got to sit down and say, I will debate between now and the end of this year, if you wish, or the end of this month.
I was not suggesting that. I was not suggesting that.
So how do we, and it has to be industry driven. Do you suggest a separate forum, an industry kind of a forum, which has got just one single point agenda, that you're going to get up and you're going to present to the world at large, the bullion world at large, here is the single body. This is how it's going to work. This is its governing council, so on and so forth. I'm leading to a scenario where we will need perhaps to involve people more knowledgeable than us in running bodies like these. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of whether it's 10 tons or 15 tons. That's much later. The point is, I think we need hand-holding to be able to create this body. And that leads me to two people on this forum who I believe, in some manner or the other, should do have the expertise to do this hand-holding. I'll come to you so a little later, but I'd certainly like to put Ruth on the hot seat and say, what does she think in terms of how do you galvanize this activity? How do you get it going? How do you help in creating this industry-led body?
Well, I think first I'd like to say the LBMA is here for this conference because we're here to help. I think ultimately we have standards that we need to maintain for refiners that are good for delivery into the London market. But the question I think we need to really clarify, because it seems there's a lot of discussion over a few points at the same time. What is it good delivery into what? Is it bullion? Are we talking about for banks, for investment banks? Is it good for delivery into exchanges, so MCX, NCDX? Or are we talking about good for delivery into jewelers? Because I do think you need to be more precise, and that there are different requirements for different types of clients, which is one of the reasons you're going to have these debates. So I think the idea of having a meeting where you're bringing together experts, I think the question, should it be industry, should it be government? I think it needs to be both. I think industry needs to be there to make sure, particularly from a purity perspective, that that is absolutely maintained and able to act quickly in a business environment if there's a concern. But certainly from a credibility perspective, you need the BIS there, you need government involvement, but it should be to give credibility, but not necessarily to slow things down. And that's not to be critical, but ultimately I think business sometimes needs an answer faster than government can sometimes provide.
World Council, you see involvement in this hand-holding exercise with the objective of creating such a body, an institution, call it by whatever name you like.
I think, yes, I would certainly, as World Council, we would support any such initiative, but there has got to be an anchor. We can't be the anchor. Even hallmarking 15 years back, in fact I had discussions with BIS as well. We did influence the hallmarking regime at that time. So we can do a similar thing here, and we believe it is time now for India to look at these standards. $40 billion industry can't just go in the manner it has grown so far. So, but we can't be the anchor, we can't be the promoter. We can be the influencer, and to influence that, whatever is required, absolutely we'll be there in the forefront, but we can't lead the whole thing.
So it's really a question of industry doing a little bit of soul searching and saying, what do we actually want? Do we want to talk about this in the next India International Gold Convention 2016 and maybe in 2017? Or do we want to say that, listen, well before the next International Gold Convention, not only will you have this industry body, but you will also have a very close cooperation program and hand-holding with the LBMA and the World Council, so that India has something deliverable. Whether it's an Indian gold standard or whether it's the London gold standard is a matter of detail, but the point is, if industry is not going to get its act together, I don't think the standard will happen, but I think Ruth wants to know about that.
I wasn't trying to interrupt, but simply just to make a note, I think, again, to be precise, you want to make sure from a credibility perspective that you're not having self-regulation. You know, one aspect in terms of LBMA is an industry body with government observation on it from the Bank of England. But ultimately, when it comes to the accreditation of refiners, this is a robust process independently done by the executive team, as well as industry players who are involved. Refiners are not involved in those decisions. It has to be outside. There can be no special favors for competitors. And I think finding that balance is really important.
If I could take that a little further and say that probably need monetary exchanges, the industry, an overview by a regulator, which is kind of the Indian end of the bargain, and the overseas handholding exercise through a combination of the efforts of the LBMA and the World Gold Council. I suggest to you that you could consider doing a bit of a closed forum debate on this, where I guess there'll be a lot more frank exchange of views. In India, you need to be an activist. You need to get things going. We need to get the momentum going. It's not as though we're not capable of doing it ourselves. Please don't get me wrong. But sometimes it's nice to get an external view on this. And what I'm actually suggesting to both yourself and to so many capacity as well as the council is, let's try and do a bit of a closed door seminar discussion. We identify people who will participate in that debate, covering all the stakeholders. We get them together and maybe spend a day or two and try and see if we can arrive at a consensus. I don't know what your take on this is.
I think it would be a good idea. We would definitely welcome any such discussions. Last, we pulled out a list when this monetization, we were there. There are about 32 refineries, so various levels. I think we should bring people together and really find out what drives them. The biggest thing I wanted to mention, Rajesh, is in this industry, as I see it in the last 2.5 years, there are individual excellences. Absolutely excellent work done by some jewelers, some refiners, very, very good quality people in every part of the supply chain. But what is happening is there is no single, because there are no bullion banks driving the whole thing up, there is, and the customers are millions of people who just don't demand anything. It is almost got to be, one has to find their own reasons to do things here. That is where we struggle also. When you say refining, bringing people, why would they do it? What is the motivation for the refiners to go into the global standards? Now, who is to make that happen? That is the big challenge. The reason I said is, there was this thought of bullion bank in India, gold bank, which was the earlier Prime Minister's view, and it came out in KV Rao report. I think that institution, if RBI were to revive that thought, that institution actually should pull quite a lot of these kind of matters and drive it, because building infrastructure for the country can be a very big part of that institution's objectives.
I think it would be interesting to know what the industry perceives, what the most urgent topic will be, needs to be addressed to. Is it really the finance problem? Is it a wage problem? Is it a KYC problem? Is it money laundering? Or what is it what people perceive? If it's a finance problem, then you should start with laboratories and certifying laboratories. If it's a KYC problem, it's a total different process driven by different people. And I think if you can prioritize these things in a way, then you can have maybe 1 or 2 commissions or roundtable discussions addressing each of the issue, bring it together, and then start to work on either a domestic or in the country good delivery structure, which is for a control purpose to start with. Always with the target, I think focus you need to be on LBMA London good delivery. But that might be in different steps towards once you have reached this, till you have reached this target. But I think if you want to go fast, then that's what I would recommend to do. What needs to be addressed first is what people, where the area of distrust is the biggest.
We need to move a little faster in this concept of a new platform because a world monetization scheme is going to be launched in the coming months. And the banks who are the key players in the scheme will be pushing the scheme forward if they have a proper mechanism where they are comfortable with the good delivery modes. So to ensure the banks to have good delivery modes, we need to have a platform without further delay.
Let's see it a little differently. Suppose there was no gold monetization scheme. Suppose government did not announce it. Would we still continue the way we are doing? I believe that as an industry body, as a nation, this is a vacuum that needs to be filled. Whether you have gold monetization or you don't have, you still need to have this standard.
We have been debating this issue for the past so many years. Several agencies like NCDX and IBMA, they have done something, but that's not concrete.
Individual little bits and pieces here and there, which is what was being referred to. But now, I think we've gone way past that stage. If we can't all sit together and get this done, I promise you it will never be done. For the next 10 years, in every convention, we'll be talking the same thing again and again and again. I can promise you that.
I just wanted to follow up on Michael's point because I think it's a really good way to address the problem, or not the problem, but the challenge that's there. Because what you outlined and what we're discussing is an enormous amount of work, and there's a need for capacity. And it is worth looking at that and saying, well, what do we need to do first? What are the basic principles that we're trying to address? And I would also encourage the market to not be shy to embrace existing standards, existing partners who are there happy to help, and LBMA is one of them. CME Group is another one who's here. There's lots in terms of the international market, because ultimately bullion is a small market and it's all interconnected. Looking at that priority list and saying which one do we need to do ourselves here, or which one can we pull in from outside?
Yeah, but the key is actually to lay down the principles. The key is to lay down the principles for what needs to be done by these refiners. So you need.
It's a question of position in ourselves. We need to be able to say these are the things that we need to address, and then say now how do I go about doing it? Which one is first? Which one is second? Do both come in together?
Yeah, that's
no one else.
That's
Expect us to tell us what we need to do.
Absolutely.
I have a suggestion. We should have a forum like one Dubai has, Gold Forum. We should not be looking at once a year meeting. Once a month we should meet. A forum consisting of say 15 stakeholders from different fields of bullion business. They must meet every month, maybe in different parts of India. We can take it to various parts. And there we can invite, according to the agenda, the experts on the subjects, have a closed door discussion on the thing. And if we have these kind of discussions, we will definitely come out with some doable solutions, some solutions which will be acceptable to all of us. And this time has come when so much action is happening on gold front. In the last 2 years, I see this refining business, which is a very new one, very interesting and very happening thing. The way things are going, the way things are shifting, structural changes are taking place. So this is the time we should not leave it to once a year kind of thing. Once a month, 3 hours, we should keep it for it. And these people should sit together and dwell upon all issues.
So in the absence of Ruth being in London and proposed...
She can be on conference call, video conferencing.
So are you going to be running the tax?
Video conferencing, she will join us.
Oh, that of course.
Ruth has love for India.
I'm happy to hold hands, no problem at all. But I think it's got to be more people getting together. As part of this, this whole thing about attaining globalization in the Indian refining industry. And I was looking at this whole thing about assaying, and I said to myself, where can I recruit an assayer from? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I could not find an institution in India that actually runs a program to train and qualify assayers. Now, here we are talking about global standards, we're talking about assay and hallmarking, and literally you could pick up the guy on the road and in 1 week say, you're a qualified assayer, you start working in the laboratory. So, while we keep on debating this thing about globalization, refining standards, I think something which we could do more immediately, more urgently is create an institution of assayers. Can we run programs by this institution earmarked only to training and qualifying and testing assayers? This, I believe, is something which is lacking. It's vital ingredient of this whole thing about globalization of your refining standard. It doesn't have to wait for a consensus and a closed-door meeting because the focus is very clear. You need to create an institution for assayers. You need to make it a non-profit organization. You need to have a proper management system. You need to maybe learn from the Swiss Federal Assay Office. Maybe you need to learn from the British hallmarking and put together, I don't know if it's a 6-month curriculum or a 1-year curriculum or a 2-year curriculum, but this country needs desperately an institution for assayers. And how can we get the LBMA and the World Gold Council to help support this? I'm ready to take an initiative, and I'm sure a lot of people in the refining industry too. But at the end of the day, it's a monstrous challenge. And this is slightly different from globalization of the Indian refining industry. How do we create a pool of trained, qualified assayers, and ultimately leads to what the Swiss have? You have the Swan Federal Assayer. And the Swan Federal Assayer has a distinct responsibility. And the word and the signature of a Swan Federal Assayer in Switzerland is literally the law. So here we are saying we're the first or the second largest consumer of coal, and we do not have an institution in this country that deals with qualifying assayers. What do you think, Michael, on that?
No, I think that's most probably the first thing you have to tackle, because people need to speak a common language. And the common language is going to be the assay, and the assay must be done all in the same proper way. I'm sure if you talk in Switzerland to the government organization, there would be someone or 2 or 3 people, even the ones who went into pension and still very active, to come over and try to organize courses. Usually in Switzerland it takes 1.5 to 2 years, but that means there's some basic education and training in the company itself. Then some preparation at a laboratory which is controlled by the government. Then there's some exams, and once you pass the first one, there is the second stage of the next 6 to 8 months training at the place where you work. So it's also a responsibility from the employee, on the employer, to make sure that these guys are passing, because it doesn't look good if Alcambi, for example, have one who does not pass the exam, right?
Very good.
So from that point of view, but important is to learn the common language. And without that, it won't work. That's the same as ISO 9001. I mean, all these ISO systems, that's nothing else than speaking the same language, that you can, people not speaking literally the same language, can communicate with each other.
So is there a way that we can request the support of the LBMA and the World Gold Council to do some hand-holding with us and help create an institution for ASEAN in India. Because honestly, I don't think anyone of us is familiar with how it works, but we believe that these two global bodies should have the expertise, or if they don't have it, are in a position to make the expertise available.
Sure. In terms of helping on that side, I would make one request as well, because there are also lots of opportunities in terms of, we have a technical conference every 2 years. I've been with the LBMA now 9 years, and every year I understand a little bit more when the experts speak on the assay side of things. It's a very high level, and we have representatives from all over the world who attend. India should also be there. There are some who come, but there should be more. So we can help in terms of locally, but I think it's important to have that international engagement, because you can build the capacity, but then you need to stay with the international community.
We go about creating a formal institution for training ASEANs, and I can promise you so, and you will have to take the library visible. The library send you emails every day. Because that is something I think there is consensus across the board. Whether it's banks, whether it's regulator, whether it's refiners, whether it's exchanges, whether it's the journal, I think everyone is more or less unanimous. I would say create this competence institutions that can make qualified people available. What do you think?
मैं तो ये सोच रहा हूँ कि अगर आपने बोल ही दिया तो इन दोनों के हाथ में पानी रखवा के संकल्प करवा लें.
So that was coming really towards the end of it. Is there a roadmap we can draw, recognizing that the Indian refining industry is still somewhat in a nascent stage, developing stage, different degrees of skills and competences, and I had hoped that with the benefit of this panel we would be able to have a roadmap. But if I can sum it up, I think what we are saying is what is doable faster is to be able to create an institution to qualify or train ASEANs. And what may take a little more time, and we should not lose sight of it, is the closed-door interaction with across the spectrum involved here, to try and quickly find which is this body which will take over this role of guiding India to achieving global standards. We start, as Michael says, dissect it into steps and say we do step 1, then we do step 2, and then ultimately take these to do step 3. We will need a fair amount of support from institution bodies. And I know Mr. Little is very active in ASOCHAM, and I couldn't meet heavily on that. But I think we need to get these sort of discussions quickly. And whether it's Ruth as chief executive or she can have somebody else come and share it, that's a problem. So is there, so we always will. That's really all I have to say on this. If there are any questions from the audience, I think the panel will be happy to take them.
Good evening. I'm Gurmeet Singh. Sir, I've seen this industry from two sides. From the corporate side when I was a bullion dealer, and as an entrepreneur when I'm running a refinery. 4-5 years back, when we interacted with people all across the industry, we were told, India, forget it, you won't get Doraemons. Finally, Indian refiners have been able to get some Doraemons. While we are talking of global standards, while we are talking of making, let's say, large refineries in India, the problem that refinery or the industry that is facing out here is the sourcing challenge. We are not discussing any of those. We are saying, become global. We don't have the size, sir. There are 20 more refineries which are coming in India because of taxation benefits. My question is, can we just devote 4-5 minutes, 10 minutes for people like us who are at a very, very nascent stage to understand how do we globally network and source Dore so that we attain size and then we talk of globalization or then we talk of global standards. Today, the feedback that I get, if I prepare a 995 bar, I'm not going and selling it to a consumer. I'm going and selling it to a jeweler. That's my first hand feedback, sir. Even if it's 994, that bar is returned. It's a 995 bar. Whether I go to London or to India, Kucha Mahaji, I'm selling a 995 bar only. So my question is, can we just devote 5 minutes for us, all of us?
Let me provoke you a bit. I don't think we are debating over here the business of substandard gold. I think the given is that we want to debate the business of standard gold. Of course, there are people who will take off-grade gold, but I don't think that's the subject matter.
No,
Insofar as sourcing raw material is concerned, and constantly there is this refrain, I'm not getting doré, I'm not getting doré, how do you want me to operate? Som over here will tell you that even in not so good times, he forecasts about 200 tons plus and scrap market. So is that not software refineries? Or do you say that we're only going to work on doré and nothing else? Because we have an advantage in doré and we may or may not have an advantage in local scrap.
The question is, it's a vicious cycle. You know, we remain small because we don't have standards, or is it just that because we don't have standards we remain small? Would we ever try and say that let us have Indian cars slightly different from global cars? No, we don't do that. Why should we look at refineries alone like that? If there are specific issues about scale, that's something which has to be discussed in a different forum with the bankers. How do we build scale? Instead of saying, how do we support small scale? I would turn it. I'm not immediately going to change the situation, but I would think that the way to approach the problem is, we have small scale. We have small scale refineries. Yes, they have to survive. How do we, scale them up? Rather than saying, how do we maintain the small scale and still, work?
If you have good standards, you would attract material. If you don't have good standards, probably you would not be able to attract material. You go to international market and say that, okay, I'm a good delivery refinery, the chances of you getting material is much higher, right? So, you are basically forming a baseline for yourself by saying that, okay, we have these international quality standards which would allow you to be an international quality refiner. I mean, and again, if you're talking, not talking global, and even for domestic market, if you have standards, practically you'll be able to attract more material than not following any standards. So I would look at it that way. I mean, it's a chicken and egg story.
If you talk about sourcing doré from mines, it is not only to attract the mine by giving him 1 or 2 week prepayment and telling them, listen, I'm able to refine gold. The mine, if it's one of the top 15 mines in this on the globe, they want to understand how do you do it, what happens after you bought the doré, even you paid them. They want to understand how secure are the assays. They want to understand what is going to happen to that gold, how is it going to be worked, what are the safety measures in your company, and so on and so forth. Mines doing on our refineries even due diligence by understanding what we are doing. So by actually entering the process we discussed before, you do yourself a favor and you open the door to a much better sourcing policy.
No, I tell you, his question is totally different. This was not his question at all. He is saying, you all large refiners sitting on the dais, why you can't share your doré supply with him?
No, sir, that's
Thank you for listening to us. Go ahead for the panel.
And thank you so much, Mr. Khosla, for chairing the session, for moderating the session so beautifully. Of course, there's still one more role pending on your behalf. Maybe please have the mementos for all our panelists on the stage, please. So let's start with Ms. Ruth Crowell, Mr. Michael Mizarek, Mr. James Jones, Mr. Pradeep Nagori, Mr. S.K. Jindal, Mr. P.R. Somasundaran.